Join me, Jonesy, for interviews, recaps and much more. So tune in, unwind and get your sporting fix. Hello everybody, welcome to the 23rd episode of the Sporting Fix. What a big weekend of footy we saw. We'll be analysing every single game, the agenda. Every game will be analysed. There are concerns for Port. There's a bit of life in the Shimboners. The Demons are on life support. We are going to go through every team this episode. And it started off with Carlton and Geelong, Friday night footy. The Blues just wiped them out of the park. It was a big win for them against a pretty good quality side in Geelong. Unfortunately, they are going downhill. But the thing that stood out to me with the Blues is their forward pressure inside 50. I mean, they averaged 13 tackles inside 50 throughout the whole season. On that particular night, they got 22 inside 50s tackles inside the forward 50 on Friday, which was very, very crucial to their 4 points. Always led the way with this along with Fogarty. I thought the small forwards played a big role. They didn't always hit the scoreboard, but what they did was they provided the pressure inside 50, and it really resulted in the defensive mechanisms for Geelong just collapsing. I mean, they've got really defensive issues here. The Cats, they just look like they don't care. They've fallen apart. In rounds 9 to 15, the Cats are 18th. They're last. They're the worst in the competition with scores against per inside 50, and they're 16th in defensive one-on-one wins. So that is a real alarming issue for Geelong. They do not win one-on-ones inside 50, and they are very, very poor with the way that they exit their forward half, their back half. It was more since Stewart got tagged that things started to go downhill. I mean, he was a big reason as to why Geelong find the footy inside 50 off the back of back 50 entries. And the fact that Carlton were tagging him made it really tricky. But you'd expect with the experience of Geelong in the back half, where you've got Jack Henry, Collar Jasny, Tui, you'd think that with him being tagged, it will still allow some sort of opening for Geelong via a different player. But nope, that just shows how much reliance they have on Tom Stewart. And for him to be tagged means that Carlton, every time they go inside 50, they are a big chance at scoring. And there were so many times in that game where he had to defend 3 people because Geelong were caught off guard because there was a turnover in the forward half. And it just meant that Tom Stewart had 3 to beat, and it does not work, especially when he's being tagged and being focused on by Carlton. It's a real issue for Geelong, and they've got to fix up their defensive game. But I thought Cripps, he's had his best year on paper. I mean, his numbers are outstanding if you look at it on any given statistics sheet. I mean, the spread that he has as a player on the outside is just brilliant. He's a very inside player. He's always taped up like a mummy. He's always inside brutally hitting players and winning the footy. But he was out there last Friday and throughout the whole year on the outside, and he's just finding the footy there and making it really tricky for opposition players, and that is why he's having his best season. There hasn't been a lot of talks about him for the Brownlow, but I do think this is his best season yet. He's hitting the scoreboard, getting possession, using it, contested, uncontested, clearances, everything is going his way. So it's Carlton, 21 goals, 12, 138 to the Cats, 11 goals, 9, 75. So for them not to be hitting triple figures is concerning if they want to go all the way. Geelong, they find themselves outside of the top 8, and I don't think they'll find themselves back in there in 2024. Port Adelaide and Brisbane Lions. This was a really flattening day for Port Adelaide. It was 20 years since their last premiership in 2004. They had their own jersey that they wore out in 2004, the old-fashioned vintage one, and they just put that to absolute shame as they lost by a massive total. They only scored 73 points and the Lions scored 152, and they could have had a lot more because some of the shots were quite inaccurate in front of the goals. But they were lazy, Port Adelaide. They were lazy. They had no care whatsoever. And when you've got the midfield of the likes of Horne-Francis, Butters, Rosie, I mean, you're expected to win clearances, and they did not win clearances. They got punished in the centre of the ground as well. They also recruited players over the summer. They got Sweet, they got Soldo, Asava, Radagalier, Zerk Thatcher. Radigalier's been okay, he hasn't been amazing. I think they've tried to use him as a intercept sort of a player, but now he's more a defensive. They haven't really used him to the way that they've wanted him to, which has been quite poor. Ken Hinkley took a lot of blame on the weekend. He had a lot of scrutiny coming his way, and I'm just going to pull up some evidence here in his press conference where he shares some issues. I mean, at the start of the season, Ken Hinkley said that they've got everything they need. He said that they've recruited these players like Zirk Thatcher, Sweet Soldo and Nasava Adegale to get the job done, and they said they were very confident coming to the season. Here's him after round 15 to show where they sit in 2024.
I thought there'd be a response, but that response is actually going to probably lead to more questions being asked.
Yeah, and that's reasonable, I think. I mean, we played really, really poorly today, and we were totally outplayed in all facets of the game, and there's no hiding from that. That's reality. It was disappointing to lose that way. It shows up to us that we know where we sit and where we're at, and we got another reminder today what the better teams can do.
So that's just Ken Hinkley sharing his contradicting. He's just contradicted himself at the start of the season. He said that they are in best position. He said that they've done everything they needed over the summer to perform well and get wins and get themselves in the top 8. Yes, they're in the top 8, but they're going to slip down out of there soon, because that he's just shared now that they are not anywhere near the top teams. He just said that pretty much they're not good enough against the better teams, and Brisbane are actually lower than them on the ladder. So that is very concerning, and that part of the facet. Now, Ken Hinkley, and I'm not blaming him at all, but I'm just saying he's copped a lot of scrutiny, and it's probably because of the comments he made at the start of the season. He did get booed after that game, which is absolutely not on, and I'll share his comments, and I thought he was very mature about the way he went about it. I'll share his comments about the booing that he received on the weekend.
Chris just said, post-game, he said the worst bit about winning today was that you were booed. What's that like in the stadium? It shows you that sort of negative energy.
It's not fun. It's not what I enjoy. It's just what the reality is of my job. If you can't cope with it, you probably shouldn't be in my job. I can cope with it. I don't enjoy it, but it's not my favourite time. But my favourite time is watching my team play well.
Is it unfair?
No, well, I don't make the rules on unfair and fair. I work on what I can control, and that's my job inside the footy club.
I thought that was very strong words from Ken Hinkley. I thought he went about that really well. I don't think any coach deserves to be bullied and booed at all. I thought what he's done for the club has been good, but look, they've got the players they need at the club, and I think he was right at the start of the season. They haven't played to the way that they've probably wanted their players to play. I think there is a structurally, there's something faulty in their game, and that does obviously rely on the coaches, but you cannot be coming off a game booing the coach. I think that's just completely disrespectful, and Ken Hinkley, that won't want him going. He's not going to be happy with the club at that, and he's not going to be excited to move on to next week, because now he knows there's heaps of pressure on him and there's not a lot going his way. So the poor bloke is in a bit of trouble. I thought Neil and the Big O was really important for Brisbane. Hipwood, Danaher, they hit the scoreboard, obviously. They're very inaccurate and sometimes very inconsistent, but this time they were very good on the weekend, and they just dominated clearance. So it is concerning for Port Adelaide, but very good for Brisbane. They are on the up, and they are trying to go lock in top 8. And with the run that they've got home, they've got quite an easy fixture, I think. And the form that they're in, they could win 7 of the last 9 games. So I think they're in a very good stead. I think they can even make the top 4 if they can keep playing the way they do. Now the Swans and the Giants. This was an interesting game, the Battle of the Bridge. It was the Swans 15-12, 102 to the Giants 11-9, 75. The Swans just killed the Tsunami. I mean, the Orange Tsunami, they were just eradicated, because what the Swans did was they eliminated the Giants' handball game. Last week, the Giants were utilising their handballs more often than not to find a kick inside 30. What they did was they fast hands, moved the game and moved the footy down inside, past the wing or even through the corridor, and they found every time they handballed it, the more and more pace they put on the ball, the further they can get it inside 50, and that's why they had so many kicks last week with Jesse Hogan and Toby Green inside 30, and they obviously convert from there. But this week, the Swans absolutely eradicated that. They set up in the middle of the ground defensively, and they did everything they needed to do. I thought Rowbottom was brilliant since he tagged Green. He put GWS to the sword. I mean, after quarter time, Rowbottom had 18 disposals, 5 clearances, 7 score involvements and 2 score assists, to Tom Green, who had 20 disposals and 2 score involvements. And Tom Green, who's such a dynamic player, he carries the Giants. For him to be pinned down and just stripped of by Rowbottom was very, very good in a Swans point of view, but in a Giants that is concerning, because if you get on top of Tom Green, then the Giants are in a little bit of vulnerability. And we saw that on the weekend. I thought Rowbottom was the main player that did the job after quarter time, half time. He was absolutely sensational. So what they did, they eradicated the Giants handball game. That's how you win games against the Orange Tsunami. And I think that's a really concerning thing for Adams Kingsley and his men. They've got to find a way to avoid that happening and keep going with their GWS way, because it was very good to watch. But if teams start to get on top of them, then they're going to be quite a vulnerable team. We then go to the North Melbourne and the D's game on Saturday night. What a game this was. It was only 3 points the difference, and North started to come out to play. They were always hanging around, you know. They kicked a goal here and there to keep themselves at bay, but it was the last quarter where they kicked 5 goals and the D's did not score, which was alarming for them, but really positive signs for North Melbourne. They kicked 6 in a row. They kicked the last goal of the third term. And I mean, these are the stats that stood out to me. So they had 63 plus uncontested possessions, North Melbourne. They had 8 more contested possessions. They had more possession than, obviously, the Demons itself, and they had 7 extra clearances. They based themselves off a midfield game, North Melbourne. They have the likes of Will Phillips, Tom Powell, Luke Davies-Uniacke, Jai Simpkin, Wardlaw, Sheasel in the middle, along with Tristan Sherry, who's playing a breakout season. So they based themselves off the midfield, giving their forwards the best chance 6 on 6, and that's what they did. But they only really showed it in the last quarter, which was almost given us vibes of the Collingwood game when they versed them last week. But it was really good to see that they can bring in a game of footy that we haven't seen before. We saw North versus Collingwood, and they played the first half of footy brilliant. They came out of the blocks early, and then they coughed up the lead. Now against Demons, they coughed up a lead. So the Demons coughed up a lead, and North Melbourne found themselves back in the match being 39 points down. So I think a positive to take out of that game is that they can get a big lead and they can chase down a big lead. And hopefully against the Dogs next week in the sake for North Melbourne, that they can utilise all that in the past 2 weeks and find a victory for themselves. I thought the acting from Stephen May was quite poor. I mean, it's not a good look. It was a fair tackle by Eddie Ford. His shoulder hit the ground first, and then May decided to knock his own head into the ground to win a free kick, which is not what we want in the game. In fact, we want it eradicated. That was quite poor. I think he should get a week or plus. He only got a grand fine or something, nothing too out there, which was a bit of a shame, because that sort of acting and behaviour on the footy field is not acceptable in the game of AFL football. The key player is Archer. I mean, what a weapon he was on the weekend. He kept Bailey Fritsch, who's one of the most explosive forwards in the game, to 0 goals, full stop. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. He had a tough week last week against Collingwood. He was on Bobby Hill, had a rough day. He kicked 5 goals, and Bobby Hill took an absolute screamer on Archer's shoulders. But what North did, which I liked, was they backed him in again. They said, right, Jackson, we're going to keep you playing and you're going to do something good, and he did. He backed himself in. He took contested marks. He won pretty much every contest against Bailey Fritsch one-on-one, and then he exploded off half-back through the centre and set up scoring opportunities, which was absolutely brilliant in terms of a North Melbourne perspective. He's 21 years of age. He has got the world ahead of him. LDU was brilliant. I think he had 31 touches and kicked a very important goal. Viney was good. Zerha was good. But there's a lot to take away from that game in North Melbourne perspective. On the D's, on the other hand, they're not going to make finals. If they keep playing the way they're doing, they've just versed the worst team in the competition, placed 18th, and North aren't really playing like an 18th team at the moment, but they are versing the worst team in the competition, and they did not score in the last quarter. If you think you're going to make finals and you think you're going to go all the way and you don't score in a quarter of footy against the worst team in the competition, I think you should rethink where you are. And I think the way that they've set up structurally, defensive, forward and midfield, the midfield was okay, somewhat respectable, but everything else in that last quarter was absolutely putrid. And I think they should rethink the way they're going about their football, because at the moment they are boring to watch. They are terrible way about going, because they keep going wide. They don't really take risks inboard. They go down the line and they hope that things will happen when it won't. And I think the D's are in a little bit of trouble at the moment when you can barely win against the worst team in the competition. The Dons and the Eagles now, Sunday afternoon football. The Dons scored 122 points after kicking 19 goals, and the Eagles scored 92. They were quite respectable as a football team. For the past 6 weeks, the Dons have averaged 85 points. And what they did today was what they did on Sunday was quite different, actually. They spread the ground, they spread the field, they kept the forwards inside 50. And because previous weeks, what they've done is they've put Stringer and they've put Wright, moved them up the field to create some more possession in about the centre of the ground. But they've kept their deepest forward, Jake Stringer, inside 50 for pretty much the whole game. And what it did was it always gave themselves an opportunity to go inside 50 and score. So what they did, they spread the field and they kept their forwards inside 50 to allow that opening in the centre of the ground and find a kick and a mark inside 50. It was good because they needed to change something. The Dons, they were getting a little bit, similar and just the same over and over. They always had their forwards up the ground, and to change that and to keep them inside 50 was quite important, and it worked for them. They scored 122 points, high-scoring game, and they got the job done. In the Eagles' perspective, Oscar Allen was back with Waterman, I should say, Jake Waterman. They're very dangerous together. They had 10 shots at goal, and Waterman's in best form. Oscar Allen's very capable. We know what he can do. So they had 10 shots between them, and if they can get that week in, week out, they will be a very dynamic team, and look out oppositions because that is something to behold. Stringer and Durham were key players. Durham, he's a mid-season pick, and he's a finals player in every format of the word because he attacks the footy at pace. He's tough as guts, and he uses the football effectively inside 50. I feel like when the Dons make finals, he will step up to the plate and play actual beautiful brand of football, and I think he will be the standout for the Dons come September. We then go to the last game of the round, the Dockers and the Suns. The Dockers obviously won by 20 points, 12 goals, 13, 85 to the Suns, 10 goals, 5, 65. Hayden Young was pretty much everywhere in the field. He went forward, he kicked 3 goals, had 12 score involvements, which we haven't really seen from him or the other midfielders for quite some time. That's a change that Justin Longmuir has put into the Dockers. They shared the goals around. The mids got forward. I think Brayshaw kicked a goal. The big ruckman, Darcy, kicked a goal. And they had plus 12 clearances, so the midfields got to work. They won the footy, and they gave their forwards every chance to get the job done. And then the Suns, on the other hand, they can't play away from home. Every time they're on the road, you can put an immediate L next to their name because they do not win games. The form on the road has been down. They've lost every possession count when they've been on the road. They don't win clearances, and they don't win score involvements, and they're just stagnant. They just don't want to be there almost. Took Millard was all right, Rao was all right, but apart from that, it was pretty blatantly poor performance by the Suns when they were away from home. They just don't really know how to play football. Brayshaw and Sarong, key players for them. They kicked goals and they won the footy, and they obviously pretty much single-handedly won the game for the Freo Dockers. So now, it's a big gap in the finals if we look at the ladder. There's a lot to take away, and I've got my tips for round 16, and it could go either way, but the Lions and the D's at the Gabba, the Lions will win the game for me. The D's are just in absolutely concerning times, to put it in the nicest way possible. The Lions will win that game. North on the Dogs, I did tip the Dogs reluctantly. I think if North can easily win this game if they bring the footy that they have since the bye. I don't know what Clarko did to them at the bye. They've reflected and they've played absolute brilliantly brand of football. The Swans will beat the Dockers at the SCG. No really need to analyse that and say why. The Suns and the Pies. This is the People's First Stadium. I think the Pies will win this game. It is a home game for the Suns, but I think the Pies will get the job done. Crows and the Giants. The Giants will win that at the Adelaide Oval. Cats and the Dons. I think the Essendon Football Club will beat the Cats just purely based on the defensive illness that the Cats have at the moment. The Saints and the Port Adelaide Power at the Marvel Stadium. I think the Saints will win that. It's a big call, but the way Port are going, I don't think they're going to change anytime soon. And if they're playing the way they are, the Saints will roll them. Tigers and the Blues will win that, and then the Hawks will beat the Eagles at Optus Stadium. So they're my tips for round 16. It's a big week, a big couple of weeks coming up, considering there's a big jump in terms of ladder. You've got teams sitting 13th that can find themselves into the top 8 if if things go their way. So there's a lot to take away from this round. There's a lot to focus on for the next rounds. So we got to stay tuned and make sure we are there for the thrill of the AFL, the last round, and the last half of the season is crucial for every single team. Just to touch on again, if you want to share your thoughts on your teams, just give us a little message under the Spotify question. If you have anything to say about your team that you'd like me to read out, it can be humorous, it can be serious. I'll be happy to read it out, just making sure you guys understand how that works. So we're putting out a video soon about the actual clarifications of that. Stay tuned, stay good, and I'll see you next time.